All right, we are now live on YouTube. And Jean, if you're ready, I'll start sharing the screen for the PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you. Is it up?
Not yet.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, good. You can go to the next. Good evening for the public. Welcome to our meeting. My name is Jean Fitzgerald and I am the chair of the Board of Finance. I'd like to introduce you to the rest of the board. Judith Friedman. Judith, you just want to wave. Ken Kaminsky, Fillmore McPherson, Justin Murphy, and John Picard. Next slide. For tonight's agenda, what we will be looking at is the 2021 budget, the Board of Finance's approach to that budget, public budget overview, and then we'll have public comment at the end. Next slide. In terms of the priorities of this budget, the board looked at the community's needs in response to the economic conditions. We allowed but limited additional budget requests. On the town side, we reduced all additional asks that did not relate directly to public safety, services, including emergency services, and capital. On the Board of Education side, the Board of Education voted last night to reduce their additional asks by $127,000. In terms of long-range planning, the Board of Finance looks to do budget forecasting. We establish goals and objectives, and we look to create stability within the property taxes for the taxpayer. Next slide. The proposed budget at this time looks at an increase of 2.65% in the expenditures for the budget. That's $87 million and $2.2 million increase over last year's. It's broken down by the town side at 6.51% increase and the Board of Education at a 0.87% increase over last year. Next slide. The town budget breakdown looks like this. The operational budget has an increase of 4.15% over last year. This is due to salaries, benefits, and contractual obligations. In terms of capital projects, there is an increase of 1.63%, and that has to do with the referendums. Since the Board of Selectmen has decided to postpone the referendums, the Board of Finance will have to discuss what we feel is an appropriate amount of funding, and that will come before the May 5th setting of the mill rate. In terms of the reserve funds, they are flat. Health insurance is 0.08% increase. That has to do with 2 years of good claims. The debt service is 0.66%, and that has to do with the library and the remaining debt for the high school. That's a total of $28.5 million, a $1.7 million change in it, and a 6.51 increase over last year's budget. Next slide. The school breakdown looks like this. It's frozen. Oh, there it goes. For the general fund, for the general education, it's an increase of 0.69% over last year. Special education is looking at a 0.41% over last year. Schools facilities has a decrease of 0.05%, and that is based on the new reductions that they voted on last night. Planned and cycle maintenance is flat. Health insurance is 0.02 for the same reason as the town. We've had 2 years of very good claims. Debt service is a decrease of 0.20, and that has to do with the high school debt. a total of $59 million with a total increase of 0.87% over last year. Next slide. Next, we'll look at the CIP. The CIP is our 5-year plan for capital needs. These are the projects. These are expenditures that we have been prepared for, that we knew were coming, and we have been saving for them. The total increase, and you have the 5 years in front of you, but if you focus on the 2021 column, which is the first column of numbers, it's a $4.3 million total for projects for 2021. The rest of the years is planning for planning purposes. And if you notice the blank boxes, that has to do with now the changes in not having the referendums move forward this year. Next slide. Next is the breakdown of the CIP in terms of the money that we fund into it. This has to do with what we look at, how we pay for the previous slide. We are looking at the 2021 at $3.9 million to fund. Again, this includes the extra money that we had planned for the referendums. So that is again where the Board of Finance will have to regroup and discuss whether that is necessary and at what level do we wish to fund for future potential bonding. Next slide. All of the details for the CRP are on our website. This is the location of it. And if you would like to see more details and review it, you may do so at your leisure. Next slide. We also look at the projected revenues for the town. Intergovernmental revenue we are looking at has a decrease of 0.64%. The reason for that, it's based on the most recent indicators from the state regarding funds for pilot, which we get for Hammonasset, and LoCIP for our roads. Other revenue is up 11.35%. That has to do with permits, documents, fees, but it also has to do with the fact that we had gone out to RFP. We have a guaranteed interest rate for 3 years from People's Bank so that we know that that projection is accurate. This does not include the collection rate, and I want to make that clear. This has to do with other revenue sources. So there's an increase of 10.71%. Next slide. So the total budget looks like $87 million at this point. That's a possible mill rate of 28.63 mills. That's a 0.28 mill increase over last year, 0.99%. What's calculated in that is using $500,000 from the undesignated fund balance and a 98.75% collection rate. Average assessed home at 400, you are looking at a tax increase as the budget stands right now at $112 increase for the year. The mill rate will not be set tonight. We need to finalize that on May 5th. We have to look at all of the variables. We have to look at the revenue, which will include things like the amount of money that we will take out of the undesignated fund balance. Again, next slide. The mill rate will be set on May 5th. And at this point, we will open it up. I'll hand it back to Lauren and we will open it up for public comment.
So if you would like to make a public comment at this point, you can either raise your hand in the panelist box or you can type into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Either way that you choose to participate, you will need to state your first and last name and your street address, and then your comment will be put into the record. Prior to the meeting, we allowed public comment via email. We received between the beginning of April and 6 p.m. this evening, 30 comments. Of those 30 comments, 11 of them called for some type of cut or reduction to the proposed budget. 12 of them called for the passing of the proposed budget or specifically asked for funding of a particular department. And 7 of those comments were of an other nature. So they had nothing to do with an actual recommendation for a cut or a fund in the budget. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that you guys did receive that public comment prior to the meeting. It will be part of the record of this evening. Printout of all of those emails will be on the website sometime tomorrow. And then the minutes of this meeting will get up there too. So right now I can see one person has their hand raised. So Stephen Dowler has been added in to talk. Stephen, you will have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, Stephen Dowler, 80 Edinburgh Lane in Madison. I appreciate everyone pulling together tonight. As I had submitted a letter previously that addressed my concerns and my thought process amongst some others here in town. And it's not clear to me, are you voting on the budget this evening? You're not, right? Is that correct?
We are not. May 5th, I believe, is when we'll be setting the mill rate and having a total presentation on it.
There'll be another, this is purely for discussion purposes?
This is a public hearing and it's purely to receive public comment on the budget that has been proposed.
Okay. I appreciate the opportunities. I just want to verify, because the notice was for discussion purposes only. I just want to make certain that there was not a vote. I was told otherwise, so I just want to make certain of that. And again, I do appreciate everyone's efforts, but I would reiterate my concern over an increase at all. I believe it was a 2.65% overall budget increase. Is that correct? As proposed?
Jean is shaking her head, yes.
Okay, so I just ask everyone who has already done some heavy lifting to potentially do some additional heavy lifting because we're going into some unprecedented times. And I just think that's, enough said, but I think it really needs to be looked at to have any kind of increases. It's difficult to swallow. So I'll sign off from there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Lauren?
Yep.
Lauren?
Yep.
This is Fillmore. Just a comment. To Steve's question a minute ago, our agenda for the board meeting that will immediately follow this hearing does have a line that says we could take action on the budget. So I just wanted to. So Jean, if we're not going to do it, then that's okay too. But we do need to be clear to Steve and everybody else.
Yeah, I think we had decided we were not going, based on the uncertainty and the circumstances, we did not feel it appropriate after listening to this to have a vote at this time. We have until May 5th, and I think that we owe it to the public to give more time.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't, after telling Steve we weren't going to do it, that when the agenda.
I would not do that to Steve.
Okay, good.
Or anyone else. So just a point of clarification for Jean or Warren, this is a public hearing. We go back and forth with them. Should we let them know that this is a public information and then the questions will be answered in another time? All right, thanks.
Yes, John, exactly. This is a public hearing, so it's for public comment. It's not really for Q&A or a back and forth. The next speaker is Ryan. You will have to unmute yourself.
Great. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, Ryan McMillan, 24 Lenore Drive. I guess my question is around the collections rate. So you had, I believe, a collections rate of 98.6%. And I'm curious, if the collections rate is down, let's say 1%, what kind of gap does that create? And what are the contingency plans should collection rates be slower than expected?
Thank you for your comment, Ryan. Meg Mack, I will add you in to talk.
Actually, this is Stephen Mack. I'm on Meg's iPad. So Stephen Mack, 16 Everett Lane, Madison, Connecticut. Sorry about that.
Are you there?
Please go ahead. I think he's on
Still
mute.
there? Here
There he
go.
is.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I sent a letter today to the Board of Finance and CC'd Board of Education and Board of Selectmen. And my comments are really about salary increases. As I looked at the budget, first of all, I would like to say thank you for your heavy lifting, as Stephen Dowler said, in trying to keep the mill rate as low as possible and keep the expenses in line. What concerns me is that the number of items that have to be reduced in order to make that a possibility, may actually not be beneficial to the town overall. And what I thought might be considered at this point or in the near future, and unfortunately we're on a very tight timeline, is that there are salary increases which are a significant portion of every single department, union and non-union. And given those expenses, what we're doing is cutting expenses for services to children, to all sorts of facilities. Yet during this pandemic, when people are losing their jobs, have cut back hours, or in fact their businesses closed, have, are experienced tremendous financial difficulties. So to have a raise go through, even though it's contractual, and I understand that's a major concern, even though it's contractual, it would seem appropriate to me that the pay raises should be at least be negotiated to be delayed perhaps 6 months to a year from now. And then secondly, with the schools closed, it strikes me that the school bus service, Durham bus, must be experience some lighter usage. And I understand they have to keep drivers on board, but there must be some money that's being saved on that side, whether it's being passed along to the town or not. So that's basically my thinking on this. And again, I really appreciate what's being done right now. I think you've done a spectacular job, and I don't feel that the mill rate is the issue. I think it's about fairness to every department, fairness to all the residents, and pay raises at this point in time doesn't seem appropriate.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Steve.
Where Ryan has another comment.
Yeah, sorry. I guess maybe I wasn't clear in my first comment, but I actually had two questions and I was hoping that the board could address them. The first question is again, it goes back to the collections rate. If there is a 1% change in the collection rate, what impact does that have on revenue? And will it have an impact on your ability to fund the town? And I guess if the lower revenue from collections of taxes means that there's a shortfall in what you could spend, what is going to get cut? I guess what's the contingency around that? So I was wanting a little clarity around that. If you don't have revenue coming in that you expect, how are you going to handle that? Are you just going to cut things? Are you going to borrow more money? Just like to understand that. That's my question. Thank you.
Just as a reminder, this is public comment, not discussion. So at this time, we can't reply. What I could do is reply to your email. I did receive your email, and I can send you that data after the meeting.
Great, thank you.
The next comment comes from Joan Walker.
Joan Walker, 39 Stepping Stone Lane. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone on the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and Board of Education for all the hard work that you guys have put in, and the employees and all the hard work they've put in to ensure that all this information is out there in the public, and also this unprecedented way of meeting has been done. So I think that we need to really appreciate the staff and what they've gone through to get us to this point. I'm in favor of you folks approving the budget as is. I think there's a couple of concerns I have going forward. Because of the pandemic, we don't know what the future is going to look like as far as education, as far as town employment, and what has to happen in order to meet new requirements. So we don't want to dig ourselves into too much of a hole to have to then recoup and potentially make changes, whether it be structural changes, whether it be reducing the number of students in a classroom because we have small classrooms. These are all things I think we need to think about when we're looking at these budgets. I think the Board of Ed did a remarkable job in bringing their budget in at such a low rate. I think we have to recognize that the town employees, and especially those who are servicing us both as office staff, but also all of the fire departments and the ambulance and the police departments and youth and family services. These are all very critical pieces that we need to continue to look at and fund because of the situation that's going on. I want to thank this and give my support to the entire town and what they're doing. And I hope that you take the budget as is and pass. Thank you.
Thank you. There is no one else with their hand raised right now or any questions in the Q&A. So before we go to close up the public hearing, if anyone else would like to give a statement, you can raise your hand in the panelist box, or you can type your comment into the Q&A, which is located at the bottom of your screen.
Would any board members like to comment? Okay.
Yeah, I'll, Gina, you were kind enough to, I'm going to go back to what Ryan McMillan said about the collection rate, and I appreciate that this is not a Q&A situation, but, and that you are going to get back to him, and that's wonderful. But I think his question would seem to imply that that if the collection rate is a percentage point lower than the 98.75 that we typically budget, or I guess he was afraid we're going to have to shut the doors or, you know, do something really drastic. And I think that we should assure him and anybody else who has similar question to that effect that that's why we have a fund balance, the undesignated fund balance, colloquially known as a rainy day fund, that is sufficient to cover a shortfall in collections of that sort. And that he also raised a question, or he said something like, are we going to have to borrow more? Well, the answer is no, we don't borrow anything. Madison, unlike a lot of, not unlike most of the other cities and towns in this state, only borrows money for land or buildings. We don't borrow money to keep the normal operations going or to put a new roof on something. We've not done that in living memory. And so that's why we have an undesignated fund balance to cover situations that do come up. So
Right. And right. I think that's an important, no, I think it's important to say, and again, I was given strict rules on what I could do at the meeting, so I'm following them. But I agree with you. I think that's.
I always break the rules, so I'm sorry.
I know you do. And that's why I love having you on the board, so I don't have to. But you are correct. We are not in any danger, even if the collection rate drops. It does affect clearly the revenue, but we actually budget under it right now so that, we don't, because we're predicting. We've looked at, I think, 20 years of collection rates. We looked at when the housing crisis came. So I think it's something that we need to look at, but the town, we are solvent as a town. And I've always tipped my hat to those who've come before us, Fillmore, you being one of them. We have enough money that even if it dips, we are okay. And even with the 90-day deferment of the taxes, we still have enough cash flow that we are okay. So that was part of our consideration as we started to look at this budget, that where are the risks? And we do not believe we're at a risk right now with that collection rate, or if that collection rate drops for this year. So again, we're looking at budget forecasting. That may be different next year, but we know for this fiscal year coming up, we can remain solvent, and we're confident in that. So I will send that information out. Again, I'm not trying to be deliberately obtuse, but I was told it was public comment. So I will get that information out. I know there's a couple people in the chat saying also, could you send that information to them? And I absolutely will. Thank you, Fillmore.
Lauren, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, because I dropped off when Joan Walker was speaking and I just got back, so I don't know if I missed any other people.
No, Fillmore commented and answered some questions to one of your commenters earlier.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no one else, Lauren.
No, no one else is raising their hand.
So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Please, we'll continue to look at this. Again, we have some more details to look at, some more facts that we need to pull together in order to look at what we will do to set the mill rate. And I thank everyone for their comments. Lauren, thank you for summarizing the ones that we've got, and they've really been split almost 50-50. So this was very helpful for us. And it's all things that we look at. These are difficult times. I had gotten one email from someone saying, how could we do this? It is certainly not what we want to do. It is certainly not something any Board of Finance would find as a positive, but we were told by the governor that we had to do it, and we are being responsible. We will continue to be responsible. This has been an incredibly painful exercise in looking at the budget, and we are looking for not just this year but next year also, because these really difficult times will not be resolved within one budget cycle, and we are aware of that, and we have time to plan as we move forward. And we are working together with the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, the Board of Education. The chairs are working together, and we will continue to work together to do what's right, to maintain the services that are needed for people who are struggling, and yet make sure that we do not put any unwanted burden on taxpayers that they cannot handle. Thank you. Good.
Okay, so I will stop the recording for 1 moment so that we can officially adjourn and reopen in your regular meeting.